Hey, grad student in French, you're now a teaching assistant, so what can you expect? Who am I? Why am I doing this? And what do I hope for you to learn today? So first of all, my name's Stephen Martin, and I've been teaching at the university level for 33 years, but don't let that fool you. I am still learning weekly about different approaches and strategies. One thing you will learn about being a language teacher is that you never have consistency in what you're going to be teaching. And so I want to encourage you to be open to learn new approaches, new strategies, to adapt, because that's what's going to help you get through, right? If you keep teaching year after year, you're going to have all of these classes with different dynamics, different student efforts, different student classroom technology and availabilities for those technologies. If you switch universities, you might have a different learning management system. And so you can best be successful by opening your eyes, opening your ears, talking, listening, watching. So let's get going on this. First, let's talk about your roles and responsibilities. We're going to look at balance, what you teach, how you teach, talk about the baptism of fire, and your rebirth after that. If you aren't familiar with being a TA, there are a variety of kinds. You may come across some TAs in science, TAs in other fields, and what you will quickly learn is that what they are required to do is very different. I'm not saying it's necessarily less or more, but it's different. Very often you'll hear people talk about being in charge of a lab, or they're in charge of grading. Sometimes they teach a kind of skills course. They run a drill session for whatever class they're helping out with. We're different in languages. You're going to learn things from the class that you will likely take on how to teach. So you'll have a class on learning how to teach, and you will learn from that professor. Please go and talk with him or her. Talk with your peers. Talk with your mentors. Find a mentor. If you don't have one, ask that professor who's running that course if he or she would be able to help, and or see if there aren't people, other faculty in the department that can help, and be open to trying different things, because you're going to be in the classroom and you're going to have every week a new struggle, a new challenge, a new success, a new joy, a new question. Every semester that's going to get changed. Every university or college you teach at, that's going to get changed. And so you want to be as open as possible to learning, to mentoring, and to all of the variety of approaches, tools, and techniques that are out there. And the best way to learn those is to talk and listen and have people help you. You're going to have to balance your studies. Let's talk about that balance, because you're going to have to balance your studies with work and personal life, obviously. However, I want you to know that you're going to be responsible for quite a bit. You're going to have to design your own lessons. You're going to have to plan them all. You're going to have to find the content to use and or create it, be it images, voice, sound, text. You're going to be responsible for keeping that classroom pace moving, to change things up and give a variety and different opportunities for your students to learn. You have to conceive of and implement all of the exercises. Then you have to grade those. That includes also the quizzes and doing up any answer keys. You're going to be responsible for doing any papers or recordings, and or building all of this into your learning management system that your university will be providing. You may be required to do the exams as well, but you may, depending on your institution, have a collaborative process. So yeah, it's a baptism of fire. I remember talking to the professor that taught my course on how to teach, and one day a couple of us asked her, does this get any easier? I mean, we're in school, we're writing and reading papers and books, well, reading the books, writing the papers. And she said, yeah, It's hard. It's still difficult being a professor, but there's less to do than actually being a grad student. And so be encouraged. That's the end of the road for you. That's what you can look forward to. Don't forget, baptism can burn, right? There are going to be late nights, there are going to be some frustrations, but it also hardens, strengthens, and purifies. It's going to help refine your teaching skills, refine your learning. It's going to give you a passion and develop new ones, and it's going to increase those and also increase your skills. There will be lessons that will flop. Expect them. You will fail, and that's okay. You won't know how to answer all of your students' questions. I still don't after 33 years. But that's part of the joy. It's a learning process, and it's always live. It's like visiting a new community or town or country all the time. And you'll have students who are going to challenge your policies or ignore your requests and emails. You're going to get better by dealing with it. You're going to learn new approaches, new techniques. You're going to find new ways as people adapt and create new methods and practices, and that's why being not only communicative with your peers and colleagues, but also being open to see the difference and try the learning. And that's where that rebirth comes in. All right, marriage, marrying your studies. I chose this image because it is a traditional Native American wedding vase. And both partners drink out of it, but obviously it is unified at the bottom. And then there are two avenues in. And I chose this because it's going to be you and your students. How do we convince our students that by putting ourselves together as a classroom, as a class, teacher and students, how do we convince them that this is how they're going to succeed and that we as a class will succeed? One other component of that is trying to convince them to marry their learning. So what do I mean by that? So if we look at what teaching and learning are, they're different than what we're commonly taught. If you look here at what to teach means, trace the etymology here, and it comes up through the Germanic, and ultimately what to teach means is to show, to point out. That's what teachers do. Learning, on the right side, is the word for what teaching was. So they're flipped. What we think of historically, the word as it came through English, to teach means to show, and to learn means to teach. So the learner is teaching themselves. And that's a very different concept because we think of imparting knowledge. Yeah, we're showing them things. But tied to this is all of the metaphors that you want to use, right? Are you leading them to water? Are you teaching them to fish? Are you leading them down the path? But then they have to choose to drink. They have to set the hook. They have to choose which direction to go. It's a 50-50. And so I just want to encourage you to think about that because it changes how you think about teaching. Because if they have to teach themselves, which is not how we tend to think about it, and often you'll see in current models today that that is not the case, that we need to do more to engage them. Well, the engagement here is coming from them. They have to marry their learning. We obviously have to marry our teaching, but in these traditional, not the modern senses. So our job is to be facilitators. Our job is to show them, to direct them, to let them try, to refine them, to nudge them, to guide them. Their job is to become engaged with and to their learning. And as French teachers, I encourage you to think about it like that and to help them understand it like that. Now, not everyone likes that. I will tell you that. I've had some students say, this teacher didn't help me. He wants me to teach myself. Obviously, for that student, I did not do a good enough job communicating what this was about. And in fact, this is something that I've provided to students. And what I've done is I've switched to talking about it with the students. Because as we'll talk in a little bit more, the students don't always do their work. Okay, so let's move on. Where's motivation come in? What is motivation? And how does it occur? And I do want to point out, notice the interrobang there, the combination of the exclamation point and question mark, because it is that. It is a question of putting together the learning and the teaching together and how we bring that about with motivation. So let's talk about a couple of things about motivation. We want to influence our students' goals. How do we do that? Well, variety. We want to have a variety of exercises. You want to mix them up in the modes of demonstrating their learning. People are going to enjoy different exercises and types of learning. Someone might appreciate speaking more, someone might be more shy about that, someone might prefer writing, or someone might be very loquacious and gregarious and want to talk all the time. So our exercises want to reflect that, number one. Number two, we want the tasks that we're asking them to do to be challenging, right? That also is going to make it more fun for you, right? And I would encourage you to encourage them to think about challenging themselves all the time. First, we want the tasks themselves to be challenging, not too much. But when, for example, they get the correct answer, excellent. You can ask them to build on that answer, or another student. So if they've correctly conjugated a verb for I, you, he, she, or it, let's say, what's the form for we? Or Mary in the back there, what's the form for we? Joe over here, what's the form for they? So that the learning is coming at them repeatedly. It's challenging and reasonable, but it's mixed up. They don't know what's going to come, and so they are watching and paying attention more. Now, with this, please remember you're going to make mistakes. It's okay. Learn from it. Model that for them. Because we learn from making mistakes, and that leads to success. Give our students the benefit of the doubt in what they're doing, but be willing to learn from it. And part of that is going to be modeling agency. You want to give them choices, involvement. That could be a choice of exercise that's covering the same material. Half the class is one, half the class is the other, and they share what they've learned. But you're doing things that give them choice to be involved. We do need to push them. They can't always do all the writing exercises, and that's okay. But they can come to understand that they have some agency in it, and they can personalize it. And then we can translate those mistakes into success. All right, mastery. How does this student here on the screen take all these ideas and help them coalesce? How do we foster the desire and the motivation to be the best that they can be? They're going to have to do the learning. They're going to have to be motivated. But our job, your job, just like the teaching and learning issue is to show them what that motivation can do, can be, and is, and foster their working at it and teaching themselves to become better, not only obviously for their learning, but for life. So, personal responsibility is another way of doing this. Be a model. We talked about that just earlier, but be a model. Model excellence, model openness, model honesty. It's okay to not be familiar with an expression or word, to not have the answer. You don't know everything in your own language. You don't know what every word means. We've always been looking words up, saying, excuse me, what does that mean? Can you clarify? That's one thing. Whoops, apologize. Let me go back here. And it's not letting me go back. So what I saw at the end there that I wanted to cover was that we want to let them excel. We want to have the idea of what they can do to change and excel and get better. We want to provide the motivation and agency by giving them choices, involvement. And agency is going to be a theme running through here. But we also can, not only for ourselves, but for them, set goals. Teach them how to do it. Help them with it. Okay, next, coffee or tea? What about interest? Some people might only like one thing. Well, how do we get them interested in something else? How do we get them interested or more interested in what we're working on? So ways to do this are to use original materials, use your own stuff, your own photos, your own anecdotes, your mistakes. Nothing helps bring you down to their level more than seeing that you make mistakes, that you've lived kind of what they're going through. You're a cultural faux pas. And make success real to them. Here you are, even though you did those things, you have actually gotten to where you are in your studies, in your skills, in your abilities in French, and so they can do it too. Model that success with enthusiasm. Make it real to them. Again, agency. Let them work on things that they are excited about. Let them work on things that are personable to them. Yes, you're going to find yourself in a classroom where everything is working together and it's been selected by a curriculum committee. However, you can still personalize it, right? You're teaching them about food. Well, let them pick their favorite fruit. Help them find out how to say that. So personalization is a wonderful way to bring interest in. How do I get there? Well, that's where we started. Now I can get there. We can help them see where they can go. Give them an expectancy value. Ways to do that? Provide accurate perceptions. It is a juggling act. It's a balance. I find that this is the hardest in a classroom when you're working on pronunciation. And you help them, you model it, you give them a tool to how to put their tongue in a certain place, and they can't get it. They don't get it. We need to be conscious of and aware of that exchange and how to negotiate that so that, for example, it's not just I, the teacher, speaking, but you know who that good student is. Let them go first. Let the second student go first. Let that third student get to hear it more and more, and then you can call on them. But it also means that when you're trying to work out and negotiate on the spot in the classroom, there's only so many times you can say répétez before it becomes embarrassing. Many of the students are already going to be embarrassed because they have to speak. At my university, we found that of all types of courses whose enrollment, I won't say dropped, bottomed out for post-COVID teaching. It was speech communication and languages. Because by taking them online, they're not put on the spot. And that's for another video. How do we work that out? How do we get the technology working around that? But to come back here, accurate perceptions. We need to help them see how good they are and where they can work. And let me come back to that tool I mentioned before, where when you ask a student to conjugate a verb and they do so orally and they do so well, one, be careful how to praise, if you praise, because you don't want to make the mistake, even unintentional, of saying excellent to that person and good job to this person, because there are going to be these perceived differences. So we need to teach them to help them understand how well they're doing. Do they think that they are an A student, that they pronounce that perfectly? And so critical listening and critical thinking are going to be important here. But we also need to teach them that their ability is changeable. And this is part of the beauty of group work or conversation lessons, is because you can put the higher skilled student with a lower skilled student so that they can both see, one, where he or she came from, and the other, where he or she can reach and can go. And it's also a wonderful tool to let the more advanced student actually contribute to the learning of the other student. And then success. Hold it up for them. It's there. It's attainable. And we need to allow them to have success. That's where as we talked about challenging tasks, they need to be challenging but reasonable. So here are my examples. In French, we use a dictée. So a dictée is a dictation. It's a listening, grammar, writing, spelling tool. And typically what we do, if you're not familiar with this, is you have the students listen, pens down, just let it wash over them. Let them try and pick words out. You have a title for them, and they know that it's only covering material that they have studied. So it's going to get more complicated as the weeks go on as a tool in this practice. And then we break it down into breath groups and chunks, and they have to write out what we say. Give them a minute to look at corrections that they can find, mark things that they want to listen to again, and then we read it at a more moderate speed. The first time it's quick, normal pace. Second one is broken down. Third one is in between those two. It's a wonderful tool for helping them listen, helping them write, helping them correct, helping them verify. Now, what happened? So I did several practice ones, obviously using the grammar and vocabulary they knew, and the average for the class was a 38.7%. Neither the students nor I was happy. And so what happened? Why? We'd been doing practice dictates for the last 5 weeks. What was going on? So I went home and I looked and was able to see through our learning management analysis that it provides that 60% of the students hadn't studied. Now they knew it was coming up, they knew what would be on, and they knew that they were having one. I told them. So with all of that knowledge, they still didn't do it. What's going on? So I took the time to have a discussion with them, to ask them what's going on, to tell them about where the grades were, to remind them that we had done practice exercises and that we had known about this coming up as an exercise. And what I learned was a bit shocking. It was disheartening. They were prioritizing other classes. They were prioritizing other responsibilities. Some worked nights and they were too tired when they came to class. So this seemed like a problem that was out of my control. It was contextual. I can't control their work. I can't control their choices. I can't control their life's responsibilities. So what do we do? Well, language classes, something that we've been doing for 40 years, is what's now called the flipped classroom, right? Students go home and study, and they come to the classroom and you use it. You practice it. Because like when we listen to a radio and hear a song, and we drive to work and come back and we keep hearing that same song because we're listening to the same station, we don't go home and print out the lyrics and memorize them. We hear it often enough throughout the month that by the end of the month, you know it. There's still some things to learn, but you know the song. This is a skills operation, and skills are like practice. Skills are like scales, right? You need to become more adept at thinking about the language, using the language, speaking the language, understanding the language, etc. So how do I make that happen if they don't have the time, if they're at work and not studying and are very sleepy and are prioritizing other things? So what I talked to them about doing was flipping the classroom. I was flipping the flipped classroom. If they're not studying at home, then I need to have them study, quote unquote, in class, so that we can do the real learning, which is the use of it, which reinforces it. For language classes, repetition trumps study, okay? They need to hear it, see it, write it, speak it. And that needs to happen on a daily basis. But if they don't have the knowledge of what they're supposed to be using because they couldn't study, then that makes the class quite difficult. And so what we did was we switched it. First 20 minutes became their study time. Working together, I did a presentation that was interactive. They had to write certain things down or answer certain questions as part of that process to try and internalize what we were supposed to be doing. And then scaffold the learning. You have that information that I've given you. Let's do this simple exercise. Let's do this next more difficult exercise. And so with that, I added more practice, dictate, and quizzes, etc. in. Now, was it a perfect success? No. But we went from 38.7 average to 68.5 average with a 102 B's in there. So what's next for you? Here's this picture of graduation. You're working towards your degree. You're going to be graduating sometime soon. And you want your students to graduate sometime soon and do so successfully. Mastery, personal responsibility for their learning, fostering interest, and fostering success and expectancy of that success. That's what you can do. That's what someone has done for you. And how we do that, we model that excellence, we model that hard work, we model the effort. We create challenges for ourselves as teachers as well, at the same time that we're creating the challenges for them. Try something new. Set up an appointment to meet with your mentor more frequently than you might think you should. Finally, encouragement and agency. Encouragement will go a long way. But encouragement doesn't have to be words. It can also be effort. Reach out to that student. Set up an appointment with them. Invite them into your office. Let them know that they are worth your time. so that they can see that their value in your class is something that they can grow, that their effort in your class is something that they can expand upon. And finally, agency. If motivation is intrinsic, if their own self-efficacy is going to establish itself, if they're going to teach themselves, then they not only need to have that agency to be able to do their learning, but we need to equip them to make their own agency, to think about their own agency, to be someone who is self-fulfilling, to be someone who is self-advocating for their learning. Thank you.